Good afternoon, everyone. It is quite bright up here, should you be up here at a future point. My name is Hugh Murphy. I'm the Deputy Librarian in Maynooth University, and I'm chairing this session. We have two speakers today. If you're not interested in cataloguing, or indeed book curses, or indeed AI, which we're all professionally obligated to be interested in, you're in the wrong room. So, I'm going to invite our first speaker up. It's my colleague from Maynooth, Yvette Campbell. Yvette has been in Maynooth for about 13, 14 years. She's got over 15 years professional experience. She is, in a little while, she will be the manager of our special collections, and congratulations again, Yvette. She's worked in quite a few different places, and she's here today. She may well win the prize for Best Talk title, Hex Libris, Conjuring a Controlled Vocabulary for Book Curses in Special Collections Cataloguing. If I only had some sort of lightning noise that I could run at the moment, it would be suitably atmospheric. But Yvette, it's over to you. Thank you.
Gosh, it is very bright. So thank you, Hugh, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed your lunch. So medieval scribes and modern cataloguers have many things in common, particularly a shared dedication to protecting books, occasionally by threatening would-be thieves with a well-placed curse. So today I want to speak about how an ancient practice can help us think about how libraries lead transformation through change and innovation. My paper, Hex Libris, examines how a local cataloguing challenge at Maynooth University Library became an opportunity to influence international metadata standards, enhance research discoverability, and demonstrate the active role libraries play in shaping future scholarship. In this presentation, I will introduce the phenomenon of book curses and show how the effort to catalogue these inscriptions became the catalyst for a much larger international initiative, the creation of a new controlled vocabulary term. To begin, what do I mean by a book curse? For as long as the written word has existed, so has the desire to protect it. One way in which people have sought to safeguard their texts is through the use of book curses. And these are typically short, maledictory inscriptions, sometimes written in verse or rhyme, that warn against stealing, damaging, or mistreating a book, often by invoking some form of punishment or misfortune. In essence, they are conditional statements, so if you do that, then this will happen. What's important to recognize is that book curses operate as early mechanisms of information protection and expressions of ownership. The earliest surviving example appear on ancient Mesopotamian clay tablets, where divine punishment is invoked against potential thieves. The practice reached its height in medieval monastic settings, often with severe spiritual warnings inscribed in manuscripts, before gradually softening into ownership marks, such as book plates, as books became more widely available. Today, their function persists in a secular form through library security systems, warning notices, and legal deterrence, replacing supernatural threat with institutional authority. So this famous example, which you may have seen before, captures many of the defining characteristics of a book curse. Steal not this book, my honest friend, for fear the gallows should be your end. And when you die, the Lord will say, and where's the book you stole away? So it's memorable and rhythmic. Books were scarce, expensive, and central to intellectual life. And while humorous to a modern reader, it is rooted in very real anxiety about loss. So it was also a cultural loss. A stolen book was not just an inconvenience. And this helps explain why these inscriptions, and particularly this example, we see appear again and again across time and geography. One of the most striking features of book curses is their diversity. There are various types and categories, including ancient Greek and Roman curses on tablets and stone, curses in medieval manuscripts, often called anathema, and these are formal curses by scribes or owners spiritually condemning people by cutting them off from divine favor. The tradition evolves in the early modern period by former owners, which can be lyrical or poetic. Later in the Victorian and Edwardian period, we see book curses on book plates that that were often accompanied by elaborate imagery created by children. There are also institutional curses and personal curses with gendered context. For example, women's curses were thought to be the most feared for their power. There are also significant traditions of book curses across different cultures. For example, there is a long tradition of curses in the Jewish textual tradition that have yet to be studied. And this diversity matters because it immediately raises a metadata problem. How do you describe something consistently when its expression is so varied? Book curses matter because they are material and textual evidence. They have immense research value for book historians, cultural researchers, and literary scholars. They are not just curiosities, they are data. They are used by scholars to understand the history of provenance and ownership, reading and circulation practices, belief systems, and cultural authority. They are also extremely effective in teaching contexts, allowing students to engage with books as physical social objects. They are evidence of how books and objects were valued, controlled, and defended over human history. Yet despite their research value, they are often invisible in discovery systems as libraries struggle to describe them properly, if at all. So despite the long-standing tradition in textual culture, there lies the paradox. Book curses are well documented in scholarship as a globally recognized phenomena. They are widespread in collections throughout history and widely discussed in academia, and yet they are effectively nowhere in library discovery systems. And this invisibility is not accidental, it's structural. If something cannot be described in a consistent, standardized way, it cannot be meaningfully discovered, compared, or aggregated. If we cannot describe it consistently, we cannot enable research. At Maynooth University Library, we encountered several book curses during an ongoing cataloguing project. We found them appearing in medieval manuscripts, early modern theological works, and even Irish language material. And this English example reads as follows: "If by any chance his filching hands on this my book should lay, in gibbets high may he hang by the neck for greedy birds of prey." So this can be categorized as a traditional book curse regarding the theft of a book punishable by a violent death. And each example was carefully noted in our records, but only as free text description. And this raised an important local question with global implications. How do you make this kind of evidence searchable beyond a single catalogue record? Here is a wonderful Irish example in a 19th century Gaelic manuscript. It roughly translates from the Irish as, "A curse from me on everyone who takes up a pen and thought it was a place to write in history." So this book curse is categorized as a curse on defacing the manuscript in any way, and it's repeated 3 times in the manuscript, showing its importance to its former owner. This earliest example we found is a Latin example in a 14th century manuscript from Belgium. It translates as, "This book belongs to the cloister of St. Jack. If anyone bears it from here to somewhere else with you, Christ as avenger, may you justly allow great woe to pile up for him." So this can be categorized as an institutional curse, exercising ownership and peril to those who remove it. So I wouldn't have liked to have been the person who purchased this from Maynooth University in the 19th century at the time, so we hope they were okay during that time. So once we had established a small body of examples, I encountered a practical challenge. How should these be catalogued? Should book curses be classified as ownership inscriptions or as provenance? Or are they distinct enough to require a more specific category? The existing frameworks did not offer clear examples or clear answers. For example, there is no explicit guidance in Mark 21 fields. Could they be recorded as provenance in the field 561, even if they do not provide concrete evidence of custodial history or ownership? Do they qualify as provenance if they reveal how a book was used but not by whom? To address these questions, I conducted an audit of online catalogues across the UK and Ireland, focusing on items that I knew contained book curses. The results were inconsistent. Where they were described at all, the terminology varied widely, but in most cases they were not recorded. I then reviewed existing thesauri used in cataloguing, particularly those relevant to special collections. I found no appropriate terms in the ORBMS controlled vocabularies, nor in broader resources such as the Getty Art and Architecture Thesaurus, or other genre and provenance vocabularies. Likewise, established rare books cataloguing frameworks such as DCRM and DCRM RDA offer little to no guidance on this type of material. Curses are a specific category of evidence that fit into the traditional provenance recording paradigm, and yet they fall outside the textual and visual traditions at the heart of bibliographic theory, so they have been overlooked. From our review of multiple online catalogues, it became clear that book curses are effectively undiscoverable at scale and are catalogued inconsistently. Where they are described, a wide range of terms is used, including ex libris, ownership inscriptions, couplets, which was a surprisingly common label found, as well as anathema, or even simply lyrics and verse. In many cases, the text of the curse itself is not recorded at all, and this is often due to practical reasons, such as issues with the language or translation. But where descriptions do exist, they are typically confined to free text 500 mark fields in line with current metadata guidelines. So while free text notes are undoubtedly valuable, they also have significant limitations. They do not support reliable or precise searching in certain catalogues. They cannot be easily aggregated across catalogues, and they remain largely invisible in linked data environments. And this brings us to an important decision point for libraries. Do we accept these limitations, or do we choose to intervene? As it stands, researchers cannot easily locate, compare, or trace patterns in book curses across collections. And this raises a broader question. How can we preserve and make meaningful what cannot be found? So in February 2025, MU Library decided to formally work with the ORBMS Controlled Vocabulary for Rare Materials Cataloguing to submit a formal term for the relevant term to be added to the Global Thesaurus. Our goals in this regard were to establish an internationally recognized term for book curses, to contribute to the future of material history, to be an active voice in shaping international standards in librarianship, to build meaningful partnerships beyond the library campus, and to support research through collaborative models. So to give you some background on the ORBMS Controlled Vocabularies Group, who they are and what they do. They are the committee of the Rare Books and Manuscripts section of the Association of College and Research Libraries, which is a division of the American Library Association. They are responsible for providing terminology designed to facilitate access to special collections resources, especially rare books and manuscripts. It's maintained by the Controlled Vocabularies Editorial Group, otherwise known as CVEG, and the various thesauri are made available online via the Library of Congress's linked data service. Their guiding principles are to respond to the needs of the rare materials community, to achieve maximum impact for rare materials description, endeavoring to retain relevance, longevity, and consistency over time. The formal proposal involved completing a detailed submission form, including a clear and inclusive definition of the proposed term when we chose book curse inscriptions, supported by a comprehensive scope and usage note. I also provided evidence to demonstrate that book curses are distinct, widely attested, and deserving of formal recognition. And this included scholarly citations and examples from multiple historical periods and contexts. To strengthen the case, I reviewed existing thesauri, not only in bibliography, but also in related fields such as art history and museum studies. Notably, the Getty Art and Architecture Thesaurus did not include the concept at the time of submission, but thankfully they do now. The aim was to show that while book curses are well documented, they have not been systematically recorded and therefore warrant inclusion in a controlled vocabulary. I also included links to catalogue records to highlight the discovery problem and to demonstrate the lack of consistent terminology. And then finally, I proposed how the term could be positioned within the thesaurus hierarchy, for example, under the broader term of provenance, with potential narrower terms such as curse inscriptions and related objects. The CVEG review process was rigorous but collaborative. So once the formal submission had been submitted, it undergoes an editorial review by the committee, where they review proposals during their monthly meetings. All the discussions and decisions are made public on a dedicated wiki page so that you can track progress. The assessment is guided by key criteria, including literary and user warrant, specificity and clarity, suitability for linked data environments, and a commitment to modernizing terminology through critical cataloging practices. If approved, the term is returned to the submitter with its proposed placement into the thesaurus, allowing for further input. It is then posted for public review, which is typically 2 weeks duration, before final revisions are made and the term is made available on the Library of Congress's website. So from submission to final approval, the process took approximately 1 year, including a few months pause where the committee break for the summer months. So we are currently at the finalization stage. The term has been officially approved as book curses rather than the originally proposed book curse inscriptions. And this revision broadens its scope, recognizing its relevance not only to provenance, but also to the history of the book and the material text, while foregrounding its defining feature, which is the curse itself. Although it may seem like a small change, it carries lasting conceptual impact. The scope note has also been refined to use for texts invoking misfortune, generally for the theft of or harm to the book, often found in inscriptions, book plates, and manuscript notes. And this definition encompasses both manuscript and printed forms across all time periods. Finally, the hierarchical placement has been revised. Rather than sitting under the broader term provenance, the term is now located within works and literary form, reflecting its nature as a textual and expressive category. So this initiative was a great example of collaboration beyond the campus and practice. It brought together local catalogers, international editorial bodies, but also academic experts in the field. I contacted Dr. Eleanor Baker from the Faculty of English in the University of Oxford and the author of the brilliant little book, Book Curses from the Bodleian. And she was so excited to see this initiative come to fruition, as finding book curses for her book had been one of the biggest challenges to her own research. So in her own words, librarians are absolute heroes. So that was really lovely and meaningful to know that this will make such a difference to cross-disciplinary fields, proving that when scholarly context meets metadata standards, it can open up a huge world of mutual learning and future research. So this slide captures where innovation becomes tangible. What started as a local cataloging issue was transformed through collaboration. And that partnership allowed us to move evidence of book curses out of unstructured notes and into authoritative shared metadata. And the practical impact is immediate: improved discovery, the ability to aggregate material across collections enhancing linked data, and greater visibility for teaching and research. And most importantly, this is a repeatable model beyond one term. The same collaborative approach can be used for other forms of marginalia and material evidence that remain hidden in catalogues. So here's an example of the genre heading in practice in one of our catalogue records. You can see the 655 field with the official term in subfield A. The URI will be placed in a subfield 1 linking to the term itself. It's not yet available, but once it is, I'll add it there. And the source of the thesaurus used, including the institution code. And this note is now fully indexed, meaning users can now properly search the term whenever it's used. Practically, this allows catalogers to move from free text notes to structured description, enabling cross-collection searching and to support new research questions. Libraries can then choose to add a supplemental note in the records where you can add extra level of detail regarding the curse in a 500 field, depending on time and resources. Whether by describing the curse or transcribing it, it's up to the cataloger. So book curses can now be discovered as a category and not just isolated anecdotes. So by establishing a controlled vocabulary for book curses in special collections cataloging, we bring an ancient protective practice into dialogue with modern metadata standards. In doing so, we honor tradition while advancing innovation, enhancing access through contemporary tools without losing sight of historical context. And this speaks directly to the theme of this conference, transforming futures through change and innovation. There is clear scope here for further practitioner engagement and for developing additional terminology to describe other overlooked features of the material text in special collections. As libraries across Ireland and the UK rely heavily on global standards, often developed in the United States, it's vital that we contribute actively to shaping those standards and ensure our collections and perspectives are represented. I'd like to acknowledge Jennifer Bradshaw, Sarah Hoover, and the entire CVEG committee for their thoughtful engagement and support throughout the process. Thanks to this work, we are now better equipped to surface and describe book curses in a consistent, structured way, unlocking material that has long remained hidden in our catalogues. And ultimately, that is the broader significance of this project. Not simply naming a phenomenon, but enabling its discovery, hopefully dispelling the curse in the process, but by opening new pathways for research and ensuring that even the faintest voices from the past can still be found, heard, and studied. Thank you.
Not quite as Buffy the Vampire Slayer as I expected. Lots of juicy metadata. God, that was really great. Thank you, Yvette. Now, we'll take questions and curses and anathemas at the end. So we'll have our next speaker up, and our next speaker is Teresa Curtin. Teresa is a cataloguing metadata librarian for the University of Galway. She does her cataloguing, but she's also involved in research and experimentation with AI to see how it can be used in cataloguing. And she's also involved in researching linked open data and the language used in cataloguing records. Teresa's talk is on generative AI and domain-specific metadata assistance versus human cataloguing, a comparative analysis of bibliographic record creation. And you have 20 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone, for coming today. So I'm going to talk today about generative AI and domain-specific metadata assistance versus human cataloging. So, without ado, perfect. This presentation is divided into two parts. Part one is a comparison testing of several generative AI models, which I'm going to refer to as Gen AI going forward, where they were requested to catalog a set of book titles, and the returns were analysed and scored based on the accuracy and correct adherence to bibliographical data. Part two, then, it compares the highest scoring generative model to a vendor model to examine how these two different AI tools approach the cataloguing of materials differently, while again also adhering to the rules given to them. The aim of this research is to determine which generative AI model can create the most complete and accurate record which displays correct Mark 21 encoding, Dewey Decimal classification for numbers, Library of Congress subject headings, and resource description access, while also applying the bibliographic data from the supplied materials to them. Mark 21, DDC, LCSH, and RDA were selected as these are the terms and the rules, the schemas that we use in the University of Galway. So some background to this test before I talk about the one that I've done most recently. The original version of this test was done back in July and August of 2025. And it was using a different set of books than the ones that I used this time around. The methodology, however, that was used in 25 is mostly the same as what is going to be used for this version of the testing, except this version is on more recent models than the ones used before. So back then, Gemini scored the highest out of the models in 4 out of 5 tests, with Copilot scoring the highest in the 5th test. What I mean by highest scoring in this instance is that the Gen AIs returned the requested information while adhering to those rules that I mentioned. And the controlled vocabularies in particular are one area that I'll kind of focus on a little bit as we go throughout for subject headings. So a little bit on the model itself that I used for prompt engineering. This is one that I prefer to use. It's called the Create framework. So I thought it would be helpful I kind of break down, before I show the prompt itself, how I got to that prompt and how it ended up in this way that it is. So the C in Create stands for the character, which is the divine persona for the AI to adopt as it goes through the requested task. The request is to clearly state the task that you'd like it to perform in its return. Example is to provide an example of what you want to see in the return when it comes back to you. So in this instance, I would give it a Mark 21 bibliographic record as an example in what I'm looking for it to return. The adjustments is to specify any constraints, rules, or schemas which should be followed, which would be the LCSH, RDA, Mark 21, and DDC. And the type of output that I wanted to come back with is that mark record. So it's just to reiterate it with that again. And then the E is for extra. It's basically for anything else that you think should be included into it that hasn't been covered by the other parts of the framework or the prompt itself. So, sorry now. Yeah, so this, once using the create framework, I used the same prompt and developed it so that it could be used across the same, across the different models. In an original version of the prompt, there was an Excel spreadsheet for a different testing, but one of the models that I wanted to test couldn't actually use Excel. It couldn't have an attachment onto it, which meant we had to revise the prompt so that it could be used across them. So this prompt is made sure that it could go on all of them. This was then a mark encoded bibliographic record, which included LCSH, DDC, and RDA rules within it. These are the titles then that were selected for the testing. These are just taken from across our library collection, just to represent different elements of our collections. Some criteria that was applied to them was that they would be more modern books. So having an ISBN, for example, was going to be one of the key criteria for the prompt and for the returns. So those were applied, and then these were the ones that were selected. Again, as this testing was done recently enough, the models that were selected was ChatGPT 5.2, Gemini 3.1, Claude 4.6 Sonnet, and Copilot version April 2026. Just as a note, they were all used on the free versions of the account, so I know that may offer some differences in the returns. And then here is the prompt that I used for it. So it's excluding the mark just for readability. If the mark is in there, that font gets very small. So this to show the create framework in action. The I am a librarian in an academic institution represents the character part of the framework. The request is that line of return a completed record based on the above, which contains the following fields. That is the request. The example that was provided to it was for a copy of Dune by Frank Herbert, so it kind of contained all those key fields that I requested it to give it an example of what it should look like in its return. The extras in it as well is that final line, follow all controlled vocabularies and schemas, do not hallucinate. The do not hallucinate has come from another way earlier testing, but I find it is good to include it, even though in isolation it does just look a bit odd at the end, do not hallucinate. And the other areas then is, as I mentioned earlier, is the Dewey Decimal Classification, the Library of Congress subject headings, and RDA for it to follow as well. Now, a note, I suppose, on why I selected those fields as well. They're the kind of key fields that I'd look at when I'm cataloging on a day-to-day basis. If we can get all of those completed, it'll help our users find it. It'll best represent the resource that we have at hand. So if it can do those, great, but I'd like to see what it can do with those ones that we've asked it to follow. So after testing on all the various models, all the results were copied into text files and saved locally before they were entered into an Excel spreadsheet where they were marked and scored according to the rules earlier outlined. I'll show an example on the next slide of what that looks like for one of the books. So each book was given its own sheet in the Excel with the Gen AI models listed on the top to record what their returns were. If they gave a fully correct response, it got a 1. If it was partially correct, it got a 0.5. It was incorrect, it was 0. And if it didn't return the score, it got an X. So I hope that is visible enough. But that is an example of one of the books that it returned for it. So the percentages at the very bottom row with the accuracy was the overall correctness based out of the total amount of fields that it returned. And in this example, Copilot has scored the highest. Some notes on this specific example as well. 2 of the models added in a 600 field, which is for notating a person. This book was not about people. It just inserted one of the authors in as a subject, which is incorrect. So for that one, it scored a 0 in that. It also got, you can see the 650s there, 0.5. So with that, it was applying subject headings that were in some instances partially correct. So it was including stuff that would have appeared in our controlled vocabularies, but it was either adding additional things like locations that weren't within the controlled vocabulary, so that deducted it a half a mark. In this example, though, you can see the ones that it got full marks for was for the 041 field for applying and identifying that the language of the resource was in English, the assigning of Dewey Decimal numbers correctly, adding in the author, the 245 title proper field as well, and then the RDA 336, 337, and 338 fields, and also including the other author of the book in a 700 field. So the overall results from this repeat testing were similar to the 2025 testing, where Gemini did score the highest in 4 out of 5 tests, with Copilot scoring the highest in the 5th test. Compared to the original version of the testing, however, there was an overall improvement seen in what the fields that were coming back, namely the 300 field, which it really struggled with before. And is an understandable field where AI would struggle. That's the 300 field, is to do with the physicality of a resource. It is the length of the book, what's in the book, plates, maps, illustrations, and the dimensions, what's the height of the book. So it doesn't have that information necessarily to hand, as it were. So it trying to get that right is tricky, but it was getting much better at it compared to last year, which was interesting to see. Similar issues did remain, though, in the hallucinations, as I mentioned, in subject headings. And that kind of reiterates the need for review of every single field. Even if it looks correct, even if it's encoded correctly, we have to check it. And it has to be checked by someone who knows what to look out for, who knows their DDC and everything else. But it is interesting to see how it did improve in under a year, the changes between the models and everything that was there. As an aside, I mentioned earlier that after I prompted the models, I stored the information in a text file locally. This is a learned experience, as I went back to check an early version of a prompt that was on ChatGPT from early research. And I wanted to check the improvements from then to now. But when I went back in and reopened that instance of ChatGPT, it reran my original requests through a newer model. And I wouldn't have necessarily known, bar I was trying to find where it had assigned an incorrect Dewey Decimal number. It had now got the right number in the original version of what it had sent me, but you could still see my prompt asking it, why have you included that Dewey number? So that was kind of the alert for me that we should save things locally, just in case that happens to you. It's not an error in judgment or your memory. It has reran it in the background once you have reopened it. So the next part of this is to look at the vendor-supplied ALMA metadata assistant. So Gemini was selected as the highest scoring one to do as the comparison with the ALMA metadata assistant. A few notes on the assistant if you aren't familiar with it. It is currently available in ALMA. We have it active on our sandbox environment, not in the live environment, but it has 2 main roles. It can do record creation from templates or from scratch, or it can do record enrichment on existing things that you have. It looks for just some pieces of information, which I'll show you in the next slide. I'll go on to that now. So it has this little pop-up that you can get from the metadata editor. The only essential field within it is the title field. But for this, I included the title, the ISBN, and then attached photos of the title page and the colophon of the same books that were tested on the earlier versions. So to try and keep it fair for comparison with Gemini. I used a very basic prompt for Gemini this time to not bias the results. I didn't ask it for specific fields because I wasn't asking for specific fields from the Alma version, just to see what they would do. So Gemini was also just given a basic enough prompt, which is there: create a Mark 21 record using RDA, Dewey Decimal Classification, and Library of Congress subject headings. For the following book, use all attached images for content generation, do not hallucinate, and the title of the book is "And its ISBN." So the overall results in it was interesting, and to see how it handled the different information and what it would return based on the lack of supplied and asked for fields. So Gemini actually did include different fields than what it had been in the version where it was specifically asked, one being a 040 field, which had a $A symbol of DLC, so it looks like it had Library of Congress information in it. So notes on the Alma one was as well, it was missing some of the punctuation and the encoding that should have been within it, so like colons, semicolons, dashes, that kind of thing. But what it does include is a custom 588 field and a $7 symbol to alert the user that AI has been used in this record generation. When you use it for enrichment as well, it kind of highlights it so you know exactly which fields it went into as well. So if you want to take them out, it's easier to find where they are, or you want to review them. The overall quality from Gemini was similar to the original testing. And then a note again on the 300 field. Gemini attempted it, but Alma did not. It just left that field empty, which was, interesting in itself as well. Yeah. Next one. So some key takeaways from this research is, again, the quality checking and analysis is essential. Even if it looks correct, we have to check. The need for a human in the loop to review all the content that comes back from AI is key. It can be helpful in certain parts of record generation. There are certain fields that it can help us with, but the need for review and checking is key. I would also like just a note of the ethical usage of where is it getting the data from. There is elements of that, and also the environmental concerns of overuse of AI. Like we know that it does have an environmental impact. So I suppose choosing the right tool for the task that you want to do, and also ensuring that it is the correct thing to do is key to keep in mind. Beware of hallucinations. Even inserting the line, it still can hallucinate, and just to keep an eye out for it. Save or take note of everything that's generated to avoid data loss and potential confusion. And just to consider when using it, why are you using it? Is it for speed? Is there use cases for it? How accurate is it? And just have a balanced approach in using it. I am happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Teresa. Two really, really cool talks there. And the theme of the conference is transforming futures. I think you both really hit that theme nicely. Now, my retina is actually burnt, so I can't see. But if we have questions, I think Jenny is out there with the microphone. Jenny, is that you? Do we have any questions? Yep. And colleagues, you're going to probably have to come back up here unless... Oh, actually, could you come down with the microphone for the guys, if that's okay? And we'll mix and match. Joe, is it?
Yeah, you can see me. Hi, great presentations, very thought-provoking. Yvette, I wanted to ask you about, once you've arrived at your term, how do you go back and find all the things that you want to add that term to? You're starting with the same problem that you can't find them. So what's your process for that, and how would you recommend going about it?
So during our cataloguing project, I came across 5 examples. So I didn't have a whole backlog yet, and most of our collection is kind of partly catalogued. And we're in the middle of phase 2 of a cataloguing project, which is to enhance our records with this type of data, so copy-specific information. So I know from the work that I've done over the last year or so that there is definitely 5 examples that I can use and include that note in. And what I'd say as well to other cataloguers is that once it's published on the Library of Congress website, if you know you have book curses, use them, please, because it would be really good to kind of get a data set of examples. So as we go on with the phase 2 of our cataloguing project, hopefully we'll find more, and it's not just 5 in our collection. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Any other questions from the floor? Yep.
Thanks, Yvette, and thanks, Teresa. Brilliant presentations, both intellectually fascinating and practically important. Not everything will be. This is a question for you, Yvette. I think you mentioned the potential extensibility of this work to other kinds of marginalia. Do you have your eye on something else?
Yes, I do. So there's loads of examples that we can use, and one of the examples, I think I might have had it in my slide, was pen trials. So pen trials that were used by scribes, testing different things, testing different inscriptions. I haven't actually seen in the ORBMS controlled vocabulary if that is in it yet. Potentially it might not be, so that would be another example of submitting it. But I've also submitted a second term since we came across this example, and I've submitted the process. Over the last few months, I found offsets, which is when manuscript waste offsets onto the binding or the inside of the boards, and you can see the marks where it has been left, even if the manuscript fragment is no longer within the binding. That wasn't in the controlled vocabulary, which I thought was interesting. There was I suppose, there was a version of it that only included where it is offsetting from printed waste, but not manuscript waste. So I've put in a proposal to change the current scope note that is in there. So it's not a new proposal as such, it's just a change to the existing term that doesn't include manuscript. Thank you.
Okay. Yep, we have a question over here.
Thank you very much. Really interesting. Thank you. I suppose for the second one, I'm really interested in the sort of interaction that you're having with the computer and thinking about what AI is giving you. It seems to be as accurate in its inconsistency as its accuracy as well. So I was, just reading across the horizontal, and I could see how it was like woeful in some of the fields and brilliant in some of the other ones. So at what point do you think, let's say it was a bit like Google Translate that's getting better all the time, at what point can you see it getting close to where you'd actually find it as a useful tool at some point?
That's a really good question. I think it really depends on what you're hoping to use it for. I think there are certain use cases where it could be used. So for example, I've tested it on doing 505 table of contents fields. If I were to sit down and manually do a table of contents, it could take a very long time if it's a medical textbook. So I've tried it with that on ChatGPT to see could it do basic enough encoding, so not necessarily doing like T's and R's, but just going through, and it can do it. From what I could see, one of the longer ones, there was an error, but I think it might have been because of the picture as opposed to what it encoded it as. So that's an example from now. Another example that I had on a poster from Conul last year was for translation. We had a collection of books that had Fracter German in it that we're finding very hard to find matches for. So I asked again ChatGPT, could it translate the Fracter German from an image to modern German? And then using the modern German, I was able to find the book on WorldCat, just make sure it matched, and then catalog it. So I think it really depends. Now, if it was to do like a whole record, I don't think we're there yet, and I don't think we'll be there for a while.
Thank you. A question down the back.
Hi, just a question for Teresa. We've been experimenting as well, and actually one of the things we found is reproducibility is quite a problem, and actually running the same prompt on the same thing gets wildly different results depending on the model. Have you done any testing on that, where actually if you generate the same record 2 or 3 times, it's different?
I haven't, but my understanding with a lot of gen models is even if it wasn't for like a cataloging record, say, it'll very rarely generate the same thing twice.
But I would wonder, in a trained model as opposed to a generative model, would it be more consistent? I don't have a better answer than that. But yeah, it is interesting. Like it won't necessarily do the same thing each time, bar the information that you supply to it. Like if you give it the ISBN will be in it. If you give it the title will be in it. Yeah, interesting.
I might ask a question if that's okay, and it's for you both. This is all, if like me, you catalogued your first book in the mid-90s, this is all a bit existential. Where is this going? So, like, Yvette, you were talking about something like actively amending how standards are and so on, and you obviously invested a lot of kind of scholarly time in this. And Teresa, then you're talking about harnessing AI. So in 10 years' time, in an academic library like Maynooth or Galway, what are humans going to be doing in the metadata process?
For me, I'd say it's sharing the metadata, because the systems have changed so much that the systems are not just, or the terms that, like, for example, the book curses, cataloging, it's not just going to be maintained in one system. That by doing this kind of stuff, it's shared metadata. So that's 10 years. I'm hoping that that's going to continue. That's what I think from my perspective anyway.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like, it is more of, I suppose, a community space and like this work that we're doing. Yeah. Like, but with AI and stuff, like I think it's hard to say, but maybe it'll be involved again, like in workflows for more time-consuming parts of it, or helping get the process going for, say we don't have a match, we have something unusual, maybe you could start a record, just a little bit of the bare basics, and then we fill it in from there. But I think it'll be that kind of choice will be based on, do cataloger communities as a whole think this is a good thing to do?
But the human sort of agency won't be gone.
No.
They said no.
No.
Great. Do we have any other questions from the floor? I see Evelyn.
Thanks. This is for Teresa. I'm just wondering, for your samples were modern books that had ISBNs, and I'm presuming that is because there was enough information for the AI to glean the correct information for most of the fields for the modern books. But if they were for older material, that would be more difficult. Is that right?
Potentially. I suppose it would kind of depend on how it would handle the information that you gave it. Like, would it be able to search on less criteria? It's definitely something I'm interested in trying out, like on, like, say, a pamphlet, or like maybe a small local publication that mightn't necessarily have wide information available online. Would it be just putting the information that I give it into a template of mark fields, or would it hallucinate content to put into those mark fields because it was asked to? It's definitely something I definitely want to check out. I want to see what would happen with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll actually just add to that as well, because one of our early printed books, I put into myself and my colleague put into GTP to see if it could generate a mark record. And while it could do the structure of the record and it looked great, the more you looked at it, it didn't really understand the frameworks for the rules that are associated with rare books cataloguing. And so it wasn't able to understand that level. It looked good, but when you actually looked closer at what it had returned, it wasn't able to do it compared to a modern book. So that was a while ago, so I'd love to test it again, see if it's gotten better. Like you say, it keeps changing the results.
Brilliant. I don't see any more hands. I think you've had the right audience for these talks, guys, but they've been absolutely brilliant. And thanks to our mic managers, can I just ask everyone to show your appreciation again for two brilliant talks?